Okay, so when we talk about the staffing process in whole, we call this as the recruitment and selection process in the HR discipline. So this is going to cover a whole lot of operative functions that we were discussing in the last class. And this is going to cover recruitment, selection, and then how do we go about doing orientation, induction, and then finally placement. So it's an overview of how the entire recruitment and the selection process takes place in an organization. So what you need to understand here is this is a very general uh, template of how recruitment and selection is done in a broader perspective. But when you typically get into a certain industry, when you get into a certain organization which belongs to a certain industry, most of these processes will get customized. Like, for example, if you get hired by an IT firm and you're going to be working as a recruiter, you're going to be hiring IT staff or backend executives. So what happens is the recruitment selection will get customized according to how that particular firm wants to get the right person for the right job. Okay, so what you need to understand is this is the generic template, but there is no hard and fast rule that we're going to be going ahead with that, though at least about 70% of it is going to remain the same, but there's going to be a high degree of customization that we will bring in according to the job that we are looking at, according to the industry, according to the job description, according to the job analysis itself. So depending on what is available with us in terms of description and specification, accordingly, our recruitment strategy as well as the selection strategy also is going to change according to what we think is going to be the best way by which we can get the right people for the right job. So what do we have in this particular topic? We will be understanding about the process of staffing. So how does the whole hiring process takes place in the organization? Then we will look at the process of recruitment. Okay. And then look at the different techniques of selection, different types of selection tests that we use. And then finally, we'll come into induction, orientation, and placement. Okay. So we're not going to be dwelling a lot of time into this because in your previous trimester in HRM itself, you have studied these topics. So it's just going to be a run over the same topics. So I'll be asking you a couple of questions and then you give me the answers. The quicker the interaction happens, the more quicker we will be able to get an understanding of this topic so that we can devote more time on specific topics like HRP and job analysis later after we complete this. Okay, this is just another hypothetical case. Okay, so just imagine you are going to be an entrepreneur. You're going to be an entrepreneur running a small coaching or a training center for students. Okay, you are an entrepreneur, you're going to be running a coaching or a training center for students who are boys and girls. And these students who are going to be coming and approaching you and want to get enrolled into this coaching and training center are school dropouts. And these school dropouts are anywhere between the age of 14 to 28. So these are school dropouts who dropped out because of economic circumstances, family circumstances, and many other personal reasons. So they have not been able to pursue formal education. So they've been out for some time, right? So they may be taking up odd jobs, and some of them may be taking up different kind of activities. Some of them may be jobless for quite a few months or quite a few years. So you are an entrepreneur with that social bent of mind. So you are deciding that you want to just one second, just one second. Okay, so assuming that you are going to be that entrepreneur with that social bent of mind, so you're going to be hiring candidates between the age group of 14 to 28. So as I just gave you in that previous introduction also, so if you are looking at staffing, so to run this coaching center, we need 4 tutors, we need 1 accountant, we need 1 center head, and then we need 2 attenders. So that is the task, and then you are supposed to write the job analysis and recruitment. Okay, so this is something I will give it to you at a later stage, but that's assuming that that's the backdrop and how do we go about it. So as I told you, it's always going to be like this, right? So if you are going to be working as a recruiter, or if you're going to be part of the hiring team, this is how a certain brief or a requirement is going to be given to you, right? So they will say, look, this is my coaching center, and these are the kind of students who come. So what you need to understand here is you cannot take tutors, just those who are available in the market, or like how any other school or any other college is going to hire tutors. You need to understand that the audience here is not your regular audience. They are school dropouts. So it's often very difficult to teach school dropouts. It's easy to teach normal students who are part of the normal formal education, and they come into the system very easily. So it's easy. But school dropouts will vary in different age groups, right? There could be somebody who would be probably attending a 9th standard or a 10th standard who's about 23 years of age. Generally, somebody at 8th and 9th will always be around 14 to 15 years. So here is somebody who's much older. Sometimes they could be much older than their tutors themselves. So the tutors that you're hiring, and the kind of job description and specification that you are going to give, you have to specifically keep in mind that the tutor that you're going to be hiring, has to reach out to this particular audience. So how are they going to understand this varied age group? Students who are school dropouts, students who come from different family circumstances, different backgrounds, and then different learning, capabilities, or different set of learning acumen that they could have. So the tutors are supposed to adjust to a wide range of an audience whose abilities could be with somebody who just does not know anything at all, to somebody who knows something in bits and pieces. So like that. So it's going to be a big challenge for writing the job analysis for a tutor who is going to be hired in a coaching center that's going to teach the school dropouts as their students. So that's what you need to keep in mind. That's why I brought this particular scenario over here. For an accountant, it doesn't matter, because it's going to be a small task of just bookkeeping of in terms of fees collection, and then management of the day-to-day expenses and paying of salaries and so on. As an entrepreneur, you cannot always be available. So sometimes you will have to appoint somebody as a center head. And do you want a part-timer or a full-timer as a center head? And then, for example, if the entrepreneur feels that he cannot pay maybe a salary to somebody as a full-time center head, then the entrepreneur himself or herself could take over as the center head. That could be there. And then we also need maybe one or two attenders to help and clean the place, and then do some little bit of correspondence, something like that. So a small coaching center would go about staffing like this, and so on. So if this is the kind of requirement, the challenge is how are you going to write the job analysis? So you need to understand the scenario very specifically. What is the context? What is the kind of coaching center? Because this coaching center is not like any other regular coaching center. So you cannot go and pick up a job analysis of a regular coaching center and then use the same thing to write the job analysis for this center. Nor can you go and copy the recruitment and selection strategy of a regular coaching center and then come back and do the same thing for this center. This also is not possible, right? So that is where a very high degree of customization is important. Why I'm telling you this repeatedly, in both our discussions in the last few classes as well as here, is this is exactly where many professionals in HR are going wrong. Why are they unable to get the right person for the right job? Is because they don't understand the need and requirement. The need and requirement of a coaching center which caters to school dropouts is very different to the need and requirement of another regular coaching center that trains the students to take up competitive exams, or that trains the students to do well in +1 and +2. Typically different. So if you don't understand the need and requirement, how these two things are different, though they are coaching centers of the same kind, they do, almost the same kind of activity, but in terms of the theme or in terms of their real motive, it differs. So if you don't understand the need, requirement, and the context, you will write a very different job analysis, and that job analysis is going to lead recruiters or is going to mislead recruiters, because they will end up going and looking for the wrong people. And some of these people who you hire thinking that they will be doing well at this particular place may come, and then they may see what is happening here for about a day or two, and then they say, I never thought that I will have to teach these kind of students. Sometimes what happens is the school dropouts that you're looking at may not be very conversant in English. So you will have to identify tutors who are also very strong in vernacular language. Somebody who knows about 2-3 local languages that the school dropouts could be talking, so that you could do a mix of both English as well as the local language to make them understand. You must have tutors who are empathetic. See, that is not there in the requirement, but you must also ensure that it is there in the specification. So when you are hiring, you must see whether this person will have the patience, whether this person will have the temperament, whether the tutor will be able to understand the need and the circumstances of this school dropout, right? Or if the tutor himself or herself also comes from that kind of background, has struggled, or that comes from that kind of a neighborhood or that kind of a socio-economic circumstance, then that's a person who naturally qualifies to be eligible to take up this kind of a job. So all of these are a little overarching kind of qualities that's very important when we are going to write job analysis and recruitment strategy and selection strategy and so on. So please keep this in mind when we go ahead and do that. So what do we have in staffing? So the managerial function of staffing is defined as filling and keeping filled positions in the organization structure. Okay, this is the third most important managerial function that is taught. When we study principles of management, right after we do planning and organizing, the third important management principle or managerial principle that every manager needs to know is staffing. So the activity of staffing is to make sure that all those jobs that are created, all those jobs that are designed according to the need and requirement of the organization, and all those jobs that are placed in the organizational hierarchy, which we call as the organizational structure. So those jobs are right now vacant. You have only designed the jobs. Now we need to identify who are these individuals who are going to fill these jobs up, and how are they going to go ahead taking up these jobs. And that whole activity is what we call as staffing. So what are the various functions? There are 5 important activities that are part of staffing. The first is to understand the workforce requirements. So how do we understand the workforce requirements? So that is where we need to go and find out the need and requirement of the organization. How do we find out the need and requirement of the organization? By understanding the organization's strategy. By knowing what is the strategy of the organization, what is the plan that the organization has for the next 6 months, or for the next 1 year, or for the next 2 years, right? And then as we do that, we also design jobs. So that is where we do the job design activity, and then we also write the job analysis, which includes the description and the specification. So that's exactly what we do in the first part. The second thing what we do, inventorying people available. This is where we are doing human resource planning. This is where we are trying to identify the number of people who are available with us right now, which is the inventory, the stock of people that we have right now, the supply of employees that we have right now, and the demand of employees that we require according to the jobs that we have created as part of the need and requirement and as part of the strategy. Okay, so for an existing organization, so if there is a firm that has been in business for the last 5 years, they have been doing business, they have had jobs, and there have been employees who've been working for the last 5 years, right? So according to the strategy, maybe there's a new plan that's coming up, or there are new targets that we need to accomplish for the next 1 or 2 years. We've created jobs. So when we look at this scenario, we're going to see how many of these existing employees that I have right now will be able to take up these jobs that we have created. Either we could do a job rotation, or we can do a job rescheduling by ensuring that those new jobs are added to their existing job responsibilities, or we could promote some of these candidates to take up those higher level responsibilities if those jobs are created at the higher level. So we do that. So if we are unable to find, only if we are unable to find that there are no employees right now who can take up these new positions, that is when we start looking for hiring people from outside. That is when we see that we feel that the demand is greater than the supply of the people that we have in the organization. So we need to start hiring people from the job market. Okay. So once we come to that decision, so we're going to identify which are those jobs for which we need to recruit candidates. So you go to this team that's going to do the recruitment. If you are not doing the recruitment process, you may have another group of subordinates, or you may have another team that takes care of recruitment. So you're going to go and tell the recruiting team that this is our requirement and we need these jobs to fill up. The first question that they will ask is, could you please hand over the copy of the job analysis that you have for these jobs? Okay, so the recruiters can function only if they have the job analysis. Because you must understand, if somebody is working as an HR professional, they are not working in all of these together, right? These are different teams, these are different jobs. So a recruiter does not do HRP. So somebody who does HRP does not write the job analysis. So that's a different individual or a different team that does it. So the job design team is different. But the job design team designs the job, and then when they write the job analysis, their job is over. Then the HRP team that's going to decide the demand and supply and identify how many employees will stay with the organization, how many employees will superannuate because they've reached the age of 60, and how many employees in the coming year will retire, how many employees in the coming year will resign voluntarily, or if you have a voluntary retirement scheme, so how many employees are there who will be taking up voluntary retirement. So you have to look at the number of people who may leave your organization in the coming year. And that's when you can start preparing and say, okay, if these number of people go, then those number of extra people will have to be hired from outside, so they could replace the jobs that the current employees, those who would be leaving, those jobs will be taken up by the new folks. Or if we have created new jobs which were not existent earlier, then we need to identify new jobs. So the HRP team is very different, and then the recruitment team is another team that handles only the recruitment. Or in many cases, like popular cases in organizations today, recruitment is an outsourced function. So many companies don't do recruitment on their own. They have outsourced this activity to third-party agencies. So there'll be a third-party agency that will do the recruitment. And when you go and tell these recruiters that we need these jobs to get filled up, right? And they're going to ask you for the copy of the job analysis, right? So once the job analysis is given, so job analysis is going to be given from the first activity. When you identify workforce requirements, that is where we have done the job design and we have written the job analysis. So that copy is going to be given to the recruitment team. And once the recruitment team is going to identify sources from where the right candidates will be available, then they're going to invite them to apply for the jobs in the organization. And once a certain good number of candidates from the job market have applied for the jobs, right? And then once we have a sizable pool of recruits from whom we can go ahead and select the right person for the right job, we start the selection process. And once the selection process and once all the rounds are completed, and then we shortlist candidates, and then we give them the offer of employment. And if they have accepted the offer of employment, then they are ready to come and work with us. We are going to conduct the induction process. So induction and orientation is where the employee is now joining the organization as a full-time or a part-time employee. And then we are going to introduce the company, introduce the policies, introduce the job, introduce the people, introduce the culture, So everything about the organization is going to be introduced to them so that they get inducted, they get integrated into the workforce that is already working in the organization. So once that orientation and induction is done, we are going to place them on the job. We're going to take them to their respective positions and we're going to show them that this is the place and this is the kind of work, and briefing about what they are supposed to do and who they are supposed to report to. All of that is going to be done. So these are the 5 end-to-end activities, which together we call this as staffing, or we call this as hiring. So let's go into recruitment. All right, if one of you could read this for us. Okay, Janani, if you can read this.
Yes, sir. Recruitment, searching for and obtaining potential job candidates in sufficient numbers and quality and at the right cost for the organization to select the most appropriate people to fill its jobs.
Okay, so that's a very fulfilling definition. Please remember this, very clearly. Recruitment is a different function. Selection is a different function. Very often, both students who study HR as well as lay people who don't have a lot of understanding or specific understanding about recruitment selection often mix this up. When we ask them what is recruitment, they say selecting the person. Selecting the person is not recruitment. Selecting the person is selection. Recruitment is different. So please look at this definition and you understand various components that are part of the recruitment activity. One is searching for, right? So what do the recruiters do? The recruiters have a copy of the job analysis. They know the job for which they have to fill up a candidate, and they have the job analysis with them. So keeping the job analysis in their hand, so they go through the job analysis, description and specification, and they go searching. They go looking for sources from where they can get the right candidate. Do I get the source from a campus, or will I get them from the open job market? Will I get them from employment exchanges? Will I get them from HR consulting firms? Will I get them from finishing schools? All right. So where do I get this right candidate? Because only when you go to the right source will you get the right candidate. So searching for and obtaining. Okay, obtaining is what? Not just getting them 1 or 2 in number. You need to get a sizable number. So only then can you select. Selection is possible only when you have alternatives. Only when there are options. Only then can you make a choice. You can say, I select this person and I reject these 4 candidates. So when you go to a particular source, the source must not just give you 1 candidate or 2 candidates. They must be able to give you a sizable number of candidates that is good enough for you to go through the selection process. Potential job candidates in sufficient numbers, get them in appropriate numbers, enough numbers, and then they must be of good quality. How do we ascertain quality? The candidate's profile must match almost 80% and above to the job analysis that you have prepared. So the more greater is the percentage of the profile match, then that's how good the quality of the candidate is going to be. So that is what you need to look for. So how do you know that this candidate profile is good? You will be able to say that only when the candidate profile, so all that you see that is written down in the CV is matching the job analysis that is written for that particular job. And very importantly, and at the right cost. All right, this is a very, very important factor in your decision making. I remember in the last class when I asked somebody, how are you going to go about identifying the right candidate? Some of you said, we will advertise. We will advertise, we will put an ad in the paper and all of that, right? You can do anything in recruitment, but everything comes at a cost. You understand that? Everything comes at a cost. So when you are a recruiter and you're asked to recruit candidates, you will be given a budget. You will be given a budget called the recruitment budget. So within that particular budget, you have to spend that money. So which means whichever source of recruitment that you are going to go and get it done, nobody is going to give you free, right? Maybe a campus recruitment can come in freely because the placement officer in your in the institution is not going to charge. Is not going to charge the company and say, okay, you're hiring 5 candidates, so please give us 5,000 per candidate. So that's not going to happen with a campus. But when you go to any other non-campus sources, you go to an HR consulting firm, or if you go to a finishing school, or if you go to a third-party agency that does recruitment, all of them are in the recruitment business. So they will give you right candidates, or they will help you to reach out to the right candidates that they have in their database only if you pay them a fee. And where are you going to pay that money from? You're going to not pay that out of your pocket. You're going to pay that from the company. And for that, the company should have set aside a budget. Please remember this. Or if you say, I'm going to put it on Facebook, I'm going to put it on LinkedIn, I'm going to put it on the job sites, right? All of these job sites are paid sites. Only then they will allow you to, become that premium member, and then premium member has access to more quality candidates. Or if you want to just put up an advertisement in the newspaper, right? Maybe just a small advertisement, just a quarter, not a quarter page. I mean, even a small classified advertisement, which is measured in terms of square centimeters, itself can cost you around 10,000 rupees, and that's very, very small, like a classified. It's just a small box, like the size of, that small matchbox that you have. Maybe some 3 matchboxes put together is one size, right? So you can keep that as the rough size, and that is going to cost you around 10,000 rupees. That's how expensive it can be. Okay, so how are you going to do recruitment within that budget that is given to you? That's important. Sometimes organizations may not give you a budget. They may say use all the free resources that we have and then find the right candidate. You understand? So that is where the job of a recruiter becomes difficult. How do you recruit somebody with zero budget, no money? You can't pay for advertisement. You can't pay to the HR consulting firm, nor can you take up a premium membership in LinkedIn or Naukri or any other job portal. You cannot renew membership. You cannot do. I mean, there's no money. So how are you going to use? How are you going to get the right candidate without spending a single rupee? So that is something that you've got to keep in mind. Okay. So at the right cost for the organization, for to select the most appropriate people to fill its jobs. So that's our objective. We ultimately want to make sure that we have the right people in the right jobs. So the jobs and the job analysis that we have written, we want to make sure that we have a perfect match of candidates. Please remember, in all of this, we have not seen the candidate. Please remember, in all of this process of the recruitment, we have not seen the candidate. We don't know who the candidate is. We have no idea whether we will be able to get the right candidate or not. We are only identifying sources from where we can get the right candidate. And we are trying to see how we can get the perfect match of the candidate profile to the job analysis within the budget that is given to us, or without a budget that is not sanctioned to us. So that is our job. That is our objective. So that is what recruiters will have to keep in mind. So let's look at what is the aim of a recruiter? What are you supposed to aim at? You're a recruiter. When does an organization say that you have done a good job of recruitment? Okay, so this is a checklist for you, so that when you are trying to get the right candidate and then have them to apply for the job in the organization, and then later on they go through the selection process, your job is going to be evaluated. You as a recruiter, your job evaluation is going to be on the basis of how well did you do this job of a recruiter. Okay, so that is assessed on the basis of these 5 points. So the first purpose of the recruitment function, if you are going to be that recruiter, is to make sure that you increase the size of the applicant pool at minimum cost. Which means whatever is the budget that is given to you, or there is no budget that is sanctioned, you must be able to attract more number of candidates. You must be able to create an interest among more number of candidates who match the job analysis to apply for the jobs that you've created at the organization. Let's say, for example, if you have 5 vacancies, right? You must be able to have at least about 20 to 25 candidates applying with the budget that you have or without the budget that you have. 5 vacancies. So we just need 5 people, 5 candidates. But you must be able to go to a source where you're able to get about 20 to 25 high potential candidates. And can you do that at minimum cost? So that's when you are identified to be a good recruiter. Because the more the number, more finer can the choice be. Please remember, only if the applicant pool is big in recruitment can we go ahead and select candidates and then identify the best person. If you have less candidates who apply, then what happens is you have to compromise within whoever is there. Let's say, for example, for 5 jobs, you just have 9 people, and 9 of them you interviewed are not good. But you don't have time and you don't want to waste some more time. You just want to fill up the jobs quickly. So you compromise. So even if somebody is not even, they're just about 65 to 70% okay, you're accepted. Okay, so that is not right. But if you have about 20 to 25, you can you can go through those candidates, you can profile those candidates, you can select them, and make sure that you have the best candidate with you. Second important task as a recruiter is to identify and prepare potential job applicants. Right? It's not just about telling people that we have a vacancy, you apply. It's about preparing the candidates as a recruiter. What you are going to tell the candidate about your company, about your job, about your culture, about your policy, about the pay package is very important. Because whichever candidate wants to apply is applying out of interest, is applying because of certain promises that have been made by the recruiter, or because of an impression or a perception that they have about this organization, that whatever good things that they've heard about this organization. So as a recruiter, sometimes if the organization is not a very popular organization and if there is no positive perception that candidates have about the organization, as a recruiter, you must explain to them what is this organization, when was it started, and then what is this job profile, and how this taking up this job is going to help the candidate in future, whether there is growth potential, how what salaries do we pay, and whether there are any opportunities to earn extra incentives, allowances, whether there are any good job challenges. So you've got to create that sort of a good impression. So it's your job to prepare candidates, but make sure that you don't go overboard. Don't promise them more than what we can deliver. Okay, so always say what is possible. Don't try to just somehow get your job done so that they just apply and then you say it's not my job if they don't take up. You can't wash your hands off. That's wrong, right? So we must always make sure that we stay truthful to the information that we are giving, and we must not in any way mislead candidates who are applying for jobs in the organization. Third, increase the success rate of selection by reducing overqualified and underqualified applicants. So when you are going to the source and then you are talking to candidates and asking them to apply for jobs in the organization, please make sure that you are giving them the right information that is there in the job analysis. And then you are going to the right candidates who have their profiles which match the job analysis. They neither must be not fulfilling the job analysis, or they should not be over fulfilling the job analysis. So that is what we say, underqualified or overqualified, right? So you should not have candidates who have applied who do not match some of the requirements that we have listed out in the job specification. Or we must not have candidates who are overqualified. We're looking for a certain requirement that's written in the job specification, but we've got candidates who are much more higher than what is required. All right, so it's your job, but the selection can go well only when the recruiters do their jobs well. Only when you have a sizable applicant pool of candidates who are 70 to 80% matching. So all of that their profile talks that match has to perfectly match the analysis, and it must be 70 to 800% matching the requirement. So if you have such candidates, then selectors can do a good job and pick the right people to work for the organization. Fourth important aspect, decrease early turnover of new hires. One of the most biggest challenges for organizations is when we go through this whole process of recruitment selection, and then we finally identify the right candidate, and then we uh, uh, induct and place these candidates. So these candidates come and take up the job with a lot of excitement, and they show a lot of commitment towards what we are doing, right? So they also give us a lot of promising that yes, we picked up the right candidate. So this candidate works for a week or a month and then suddenly disappears, or suddenly comes up and says, I want to resign. I'm not interested. I don't like this work, or I've got a better offer in another organization. So this is what we call as early turnovers among new hires. The employees who were selected and appointed after a lot of rigorous recruitment and selection process decide to quit in the early days, in just about a week's time or in about a month's time. So then if something like this happens, then the accountability is with the recruiter. So the question will be, how is that we did not realize? So they will go to the recruiter and say, why did you pick up these kind of candidates? Why did you have these candidates come into the recruitment process in the first place? First level of accountability is with the recruiter. The blame starts. The second level of accountability is with the selectors. So the HR management team, the HR head is going to call the selection team and ask them, why didn't you see this during the selection process? How is that you were not able to visibly see that this candidate had all the tendencies to leave the organization in the early days, or this candidate was looking out for another organization to work simultaneously when he or she was attending the interview? So why didn't you sense it? Why didn't you see it? Because ultimately it is the responsibility of both the recruiter and the selector. Recruiter has picked up candidates from a particular source where they have this tendency to leave, or the selectors have not seen this during the selection process. If at all they had got a little hint, right, and they could have always rejected this candidate and always said that, yeah, I mean, this candidate is showing signs or symptoms that he or she may leave. So if you want to do a good job of a recruiter, then you've got to make sure that you go to the right candidates, talk to them the right information, prepare them well in advance. Very often early turnover happens only because false promises were made. When the candidate comes and takes up the job and does not see the reality of what was told to him or her during the recruitment, then they say, I was not told. I was told I will do something else and I'm doing something else. Or I was told I will be doing this specific job only. Now I'm asked to do several other things. I was told that this is at working hours. They said there is going to be no night shift, but suddenly now they say you have to work on night shift. They said this is my salary, but when I'm receiving my salary, now they're saying that it's much lesser. So all of these are false promises, because these were what was told by the recruiter. So in order to avoid all of that, recruiters must be very, very careful when we do this job. And the last of all is to increase the individual and organizational effectiveness. Ultimately, it is the responsibility of the recruiter, because the recruiter knows the organization. And then you also are going and meeting the candidates. You're also reaching out to those institutions or agencies which are going to give you the right candidate. And when you are identifying potential recruits, you should be in a position to understand whether this candidate will match the organization and work with the rest of the people that we have in the organization. And will my organization be able to give the right kind of opportunities to these kind of candidates, and will such a candidate grow in my organization? So typically it has to be a win-win kind of a situation between the candidate and the organization. Right? So please remember, the recruitment is just not that very easy like the way we understand. That you put out some advertisements and then people will apply, and then you have these people pushed over to the selection team that we select. And there is a lot of layers that we have to see through when we are doing recruitment. It's not that very easy to go ahead with recruitment. So this is a very simplified recruitment process model. I want you to see this through and then be able to know how we do this. Okay, what is the recruitment philosophy? As recruiters, before we get into the whole activity of hiring, we must be able to answer three important aspects. We've got to know this and keep this in our mind. First of all, whether it's internal versus external filling. Internal and external is certain jobs are reserved only for employees who are right now working in the organization. We call this as internal recruitment, one source, right? So there are certain jobs which can be taken up only by insiders, those who are there working in the organization right now. External, these are jobs that are open for outsiders. These jobs are going to be taken up by those from the job market from outside. Okay, so you must be very clear about these things. Internal, external. Second, are we looking at a candidate who we just want them to come and do the job, or are we looking at somebody whom we want to groom for a career? All right, so job versus career. Job is short term. Right now, this particular position is vacant. Because let's say, for example, a woman employee has gone on maternity leave. So about 6 months to 1 year, this lady will not be reporting to work. So that job, we need somebody to do this job for about a year, because after 1 year, she's going to come back. So when we are looking for a candidate, we are looking for candidate for a temporary period of just 1 year. Okay, we're not looking at having that replacement to be there with us for a long time. That's all. But we're not going to tell this to the candidate and so on. But initially, we will hire the candidate and then we will see accordingly. So when it is a job orientation, we don't break our head much, because we just want somebody to come and replace and start doing the job for the next 1 year. That's all. But when it is career, there we are a little more careful, because we are hiring somebody for a long run in the organization. So we are very careful about who we are bringing, and that's where we hire management candidates. We groom them as management trainees, and then slowly try to elevate them to various positions by giving them promotions and training, and then gradually have them to work with the organization in the long run. And then we look at whether it's a short-term orientation or a long-term orientation. Are we looking at just filling the job and this ensuring that job is done for the next 3 months or 6 months just because we have an immediate order to fulfill, or whether it's for a long term where we are having huge plans about what we want to do with these candidates, and then what other extended strategies that we have in the future for which these candidates could be used. Right, so we've got to keep all of this in mind when we are going ahead with our recruitment. The second thing that we do is we need to plan the recruitment. So we're going to look at how many. So this is what it is. You need to first of all be clear about the recruitment philosophy. Once you're clear about that, the second thing that you need to see is how many jobs are vacant. What are the jobs and how many jobs? Which are the jobs that we've designed as part of the strategy? And then how many of these jobs are created for which we need to hire candidates? So you need to get that information and then get the information of the job analysis, not just specification, but job analysis. So job analysis is where you have to read through the description. What are the duties, role, responsibilities, and all of that? You should go through it and then read the specification. When as a recruiter you read the specification, you will get to know what kind of a candidate will be able to do this job. Very often what recruiters do is, it's a shortcut. Very often recruiters only read the job specification, because that's what we want. Oh, needed a candidate who's a BE in mechanical with about 5 to 6 years of experience, and then having these certifications. So they only look for specification because they're just going to look for somebody who matches this specification. They may not look into the job description. You understand? So it's not just about getting the candidate, but also about the job description. Because sometimes what happens is candidates may ask you some questions about the job. They may ask you some questions about reporting relationship. They may ask you some questions related to pay package. because you are the person who's talking to the intermediaries or you're talking to the candidates. So these are questions that anybody is going to ask if they're going to apply for a job. So it's important that you read the description also. Only when you read the description and then also read the specification, you get a perfect picture. You get a whole understanding. So you'll be comfortable when those candidates are going to ask you questions. That's one thing. So you will be able to clarify and then confidently make them apply for the job. And then you also know whether such candidates will be able to do these tasks and responsibilities. So when you meet those candidates or when you are seeing their profile, you can automatically connect the person to the job that he or she is going to do. So it's very, very important that recruiters go through the analysis thoroughly. Once you've done this, then you develop a strategy. So you've got to identify choosing the required applicant qualifications. So you go through the specifications and figure out what kind of candidates, what is the qualification of candidates that you're looking for. Second, now, once you see the qualification, the specification criteria, you're going to identify the sources. From which source are we going to get the right candidate? So whatever is written in the job specification, we need to identify where do we get, which source are we going to get, right? So which source do we get? And then we also need to get enough number of candidates from these sources, right? And then and then identify the communication channel. So how are you going to communicate with them? Is it through an advertisement? Is it through a telephonic call? Or is it through some poster or a banner that you are creating and putting it up on social media? Or is it through a recruitment insert that you're going to issue in the newspapers or in any of the job portal special editions? Or whether you're going to talk to the third-party HR consulting firms? So what is the communication channel? And what is the content of the communication? That's very, very important. The content is very, very important, right? Because there should be no dilution of the content. Because dilution of the content, what I mean is what is there in the job analysis has to be explained to people very clearly. Because sometimes what happens is when you involve third-party agencies and you have HR consultants and you orally brief them about the job analysis, there is a lot of potential that they may dilute, that they may not understand because they don't belong to your organization, nor have they been involved in writing the job analysis. So they have no idea. They just want to ensure that whoever is coming and approaching them is able to find a job in your organization. So they are also in that desperate situation to ensure that their candidates through their agencies will get appointed, through in your organization. So it's always better that job analysis is always in black and white, which means it's always in writing. So even when you talk to a consultant, you can talk to the consultant in brief, but always give them a copy and say, this is the job analysis, keep this with you, go through it. And then every time you talk to the candidate, make sure that you tell them exactly what is there in the job analysis. So there itself, the candidate will make up his or her mind. When they see through the analysis, and when if the consultant is going to read the analysis and explain it to the candidate will know whether he or she will be able to do this job or not. So unnecessarily, you will not have wrong candidates apply. Very important. So you must plan all of this because it just cannot happen randomly. Third is choosing inducements, right? What are inducements? Inducements are what are the things that you're going to tell the candidate that's going to make them feel attracted towards your organization, about your company culture. If you have a good culture, you can talk about the organization culture. You can talk about pay package. You can talk about growth prospects. You can talk about the kind of workforce, the diversity of the workforce that you have in your organization, right? So if you have more youngsters or if you have more women, you can talk about any of those specific things. And then what is the culture, working culture of the organization? What is the leadership culture of the organization? So all of these are inducements. Because when you as a candidate are also going to apply, you're not going to apply for any organization that's going to say there is a vacancy and you can apply. You will apply only to those organizations that make sense to you, that you feel attracted towards, that you also have a certain imagery about the kind of organization that you want to work, right? So that's called inducement. And then we look at choosing the message. Sometimes what happens is it can be a realistic image. A real image is like the job analysis in black and white. Or sometimes it's fly paper. Fly paper is a little bit of exaggeration. A little bit of exaggeration. For example, you can see a lot of recruitment advertisements where they'll show an eagle soaring, just to give you an impression that your growth also is going to be like that, or like a supersonic jet that is flying up in the sky, right? So that your career is going to take off. So they're going to have some really funky caption, and they will have some nice exaggerated image just to give you that metaphorical, imagery of the kind of growth and the kind of success that you will see in the organization. So all of this is possible provided you have that budget to create that such kind of communication. Okay, so that's the recruitment strategy. Third is, once your planning and your strategy has been developed, then you're going to go ahead and do the activities, which is job posting, putting up advertisements, talking to placement coordinators, talking to consultants, sending an email, and checking up with all the recruitment sources, giving them all the information. Now you're doing practically implementing it so that you're able to get the right candidate for the right job. And then you must also do follow-ups. Once you give it out to them, you can't just close your eyes and say, okay, my job is done. You got to follow up. After 3 days, you should check and find out, is there any possibility, are candidates showing interest, any other information that's required. Keep checking with them to see whether they are talking to the potential candidates, and whether placement officers are talking to the potential candidates, and then having them to come and do the job in the organization. And then once all that is done is where we go through the selection process. So once candidates have sent in their CVs, once we have a sizable number of CVs, and then we feel that it's right time for us to go ahead with selection, then we go through the selection. Okay, so that box that you see on the right side, the screening and selecting, that is going to be done by a different team of individuals in the department called the selection team. So they go through the selection process, figure out the right candidate, and then they are going to identify and say, these are the candidates who are shortlisted, and then job offer is going to be made. Once the candidate is selected and then candidate is accepted to take up the job, then the organization or the department is going to do your performance appraisal. And your performance appraisal is done through recruitment evaluation. So which is the recruitment planning and strategy, the philosophy, planning and strategy that you had, the philosophy, planning, strategy, and the recruitment activities. So the 4 boxes that we just discussed right now. Right, the department is going to evaluate and see whether you did your job well. As a recruiter, it's your performance appraisal, whether you did your job well. So we're going to ask these questions. Were you able to fill up all the vacancies that were given to you for recruitment? Were you able to identify candidates, and are all the jobs filled right now? Yes or no? If it's yes, you've done a good job. If it's no, then you've done a bad job. Second, were all these vacancies filled up within the time that was given to you to complete the recruitment? So they give you 1 month's time and say within 30 days, we need these jobs to be filled up. So have you been able to show that? Are all these jobs filled, and whether you were able to complete the recruitment process within 15 days? If it's yes, you've done a good job. If it's no, then you've done a bad job. Third, we gave you a budget. We told you, okay, we gave you 50,000 rupees, and we told for you to fill up these 15 positions. So have you been able to spend that 50,000 on the recruitment activities and spending it on advertisement and paying consultants or paying subscription charges on portal sites? You've done all that. And then have you been able to, how much did you spend? 50,000 was given to you. Did you spend the whole of 50,000, or you just spent 35,000? So if you've just spent 35,000 and you filled up those 15 positions and you saved 15,000 for the company, then the cost per job will come down. All right, so cost per job will come down if you've done that in 35,000. But if you spent all the 50,000 and filled up 15 positions, cost per job will go up compared to the 35,000 that you spent for filling. Right, so if the cost per job is low, then you've done a good job. the cost per job is high. If it's exceeded the budget, then it is not good. So that is how you as a recruiter and is going to be evaluated. Your performance is going to be appraised and evaluated, and then whether you did a good job of recruitment is going to be assessed. Okay, so please remember, these are the various activities that we do in the recruitment until we do evaluation. So that's how critical and important this particular job is going to be. So when we come back, we will continue. We will look at how this whole aspect of recruitment feeds forward into selection. And imagine if we are going to spend so much of time, energy, and activity ensuring that we do the right job in terms of recruitment, the same thing is going to be fed forward for selection. So selectors will be able to do a good job of it if the recruiters are able to do it. So when we come back in the next class, we will look at the second half of the model, and then we will go into the various sources of recruitment, and then finally we'll go into selection, and then we will see how the entire induction and orientation takes place. Okay, so it's as interesting as the activity can get through. And once we give you some practical instances on working on some of these things, then you understand how nerve-wracking some of this can be. Okay, good. Any questions? Anything? We just have a minute. Any quick questions that you have? If there are no questions, or if you have questions later, you can always put it in the WhatsApp, and then we will always have a discussion over it. Okay. All right, then if there are no questions, then we'll end the class. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.